If you're a filmmaker, you probably care about the camera you use, whether that's the latest iPhone or the latest Red camera. But the audience who is watching your film or your video, they don't care. All they care about is the story you're trying to tell. Now, that doesn't mean it shouldn't look good. You don't want technical limitations, whether it be video or audio, to pull someone out of the story and then they do notice the tech. For example, if a film is out of focus, or even worse, if the audio is bad. But otherwise, you don't hear people talking about what something was shot on, other than filmmakers, of course. And this relates to whether it's a mirrorless camera, a DSLR, or again, a big cinema camera, or of course, what I talk about a lot, and that is mobile video, mobile filmmaking. And so today, my guest on the podcast is a guy who really fits this bill. He doesn't really care about the tech he's using, and that tech happens to be an iPhone. He just wants to tell good stories. Hey guys, Blake Calhoun, and another episode of Almost Professional, the podcast about mobile filmmaking, DIY filmmaking, indie filmmaking, really all things filmmaking. And today is an interview episode, not a rant like I've been doing recently or a commentary. I like doing those, but it's fun to mix it up with other people in this industry who are doing cool things. And today I am talking with a broadcast TV reporter who has migrated, not sure what the right word is, into doing mobile video. The deal is, though, he takes mobile video and uses it in broadcast applications. And so really that's pretty unique and not done that often. And I'm talking about an entire show, not just a clip here or there or a segment. He produces entire stories all on an iPhone for broadcast TV and, of course, for the internet. If you follow the mobile video scene, you've probably heard of my guest, and his name is Mike Castellucci. He has won 22 Emmys, some of these for smartphone productions and some of them for traditional broadcast production. And he is an Edward R. Murrow recipient. On this podcast and my YouTube channel, I tend to focus more on the narrative filmmaking or YouTube filmmaking, a different kind of storytelling than news. I don't personally do news stories, and I've never worked in the news myself, but when it comes to mobile video, I think it really fits very well. Really better than it does for what I use it for, and again, more narrative stuff and YouTube. Although now with the latest, greatest phones, the YouTube side is becoming more and more relevant, and not just for people starting out. Mixing and matching with traditional cameras with a smartphone, which if you listen to me on this podcast and again, my YouTube channel, you know I talk about that quite a bit. So I'll get to the interview in just a second, but on that topic of the latest, greatest phones, I just want to briefly mention, and I'll do a lot more coverage of this in the future, the iPhone 12. The announcement was just a few days ago, and I have to say, I am impressed. I didn't think Apple would actually do it. You can now shoot 10-bit HDR 4K. 10-bit video on a smartphone. I know some Android phones have had this for a little while, but I haven't really seen it myself, and I haven't really seen it used widely at all. And so this could be a legitimate game changer. That is an overused phrase, that's for sure. But if this video is really 10-bit, lots of times specs don't live up to in practice use, if you know what I'm saying. But I am extremely pleased to hear the 10-bit side, along with the fact that they're now using a larger sensor in the phone. So not only will it be better in low light, we should be able to get better shallow depth of field. And with the new LiDAR camera, that will open up possibilities to do portrait mode video. I really believe that's coming to where you're getting the fake bokeh, but hey, if it looks real, doesn't really matter if it's fake. Again, using a small sensor camera, that's hard to get. Of course, you can do it now with still photography, and it looks pretty good. It's gotten really good. Not perfect, but pretty darn good. But if you can get that into video, wow, that really will be a game changer. And again, especially as a B camera, but for many people, an A camera. I mean, a lot of people use the iPhone as an A camera right now. myself included. I do a lot of videos on my YouTube channel. They're all iPhone. But my guest today, Mike Castellucci, he does everything on his iPhone. So here's my conversation with Mike, covering everything from mobile journalism to his show called Phoning It In. And we even talk a little bit about the iPhone 12. All right, Mike. Well, hey, thanks for being on my podcast. Been wanting to talk to you for a while. How are you?
Yeah, good. How are you?
I am hanging in there.
It's getting a little chilly up where I am, and I don't like that. I'd rather be down where you are.
Where are you right now?
Michigan.
Okay. I know you from when you were working at a WFAA and ABC affiliate in Dallas, and then I know you've worked at some other larger market. I believe, didn't you work in Los Angeles?
Yep, I did. Worked at CBS 2 in Los Angeles and in San Diego also. So just those three markets, Dallas, San Diego, and Los Angeles, should tell you what I think of Michigan.
Yeah, well, it's a little sunnier in these spots.
Yeah, that's right.
What are you doing in Michigan?
Right now, I'm teaching full-time at Michigan State University. I'm teaching broadcast journalism, and actually storytelling with phones is one of the courses that I teach. It was one of the first, that's why I took the job up here, is they were willing to offer me kind of a first of its kind. And that was, they knew the work that I was doing with my phone and made it part of their major up here. It's called Storytelling with Phones. And so it's been going for the last couple of years.
Well, let me back up just a second. Well, I know you from when you were a broadcast reporter, and then I coincidentally met you on Twitter again when you started doing your iPhone stuff, because of course I run a YouTube channel about mobile filmmaking. But let me back up a little bit. Was your career path always to be in broadcast journalism? Is that how you started out your career?
Yeah, I've been working at TV stations since I got my first job, working my way up, just like it seems like everybody does in this business, and started in a small market in Colorado, at market 190, and then eventually got to Los Angeles and then Dallas, and I still have been working there and other places. In fact, I've got a piece that's airing on NBCLX coming up, and it'll be online.
Well, so that was my next question. So are you still doing any broadcast stuff, or it sounds like you're more like you're doing some freelance kind of stuff here and there?
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what I'm doing. I've since coming up here to teach it, I've been lucky enough to continue to work at WFAA in Dallas, where every summer I'll go there, I'll shoot a whole bunch of stories, come back up here and edit them, and then they'll roll them out. And then I'll also supplement that with a half-hour show that I call Phoning It In. And so I just aired the last one a few months ago. I'd like to start working on another one coming up, but who knows with this virus.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to Phoning It In just a minute. I'm kind of interested to hear, though, before you started that show, how long have you been using a phone? Because you come from a broadcast background. How was that transition, and why did you start using a phone to help tell your stories?
I love this. I love telling this story. I've been a reporter my whole career. I never picked up a camera, but I've been lucky enough to work with the best photojournalists in the country. I mean, literally the best. The NPPA, the National Press Photographers Association, they have, competitions, and I've literally worked with the photographers of the year, 3, I think, of them. And when I was working in Los Angeles, working with the best photojournalists, I guess you sort of, like photosynthesis, it kind of rubbed off on me how they do things. They were doing things with the big cameras, but when I finally picked up a phone, it really helped. But here's where I started using a phone. I was in literally a creative black hole working in the San Diego market. Nothing against the San Diego market, but when you have the ocean, that's all anybody really wants to do. I just found myself not working well with the photogs that I'd be teamed with. So I went out, and it was just at the point, do you remember when a camera called the Flip camera came out. It was like $140 at Target.
Yeah, sure.
It was the first kind of consumer HD camera. It was horrible because it didn't have any way to get audio out or anything. It had a built-in microphone and you couldn't put a lens on it or anything. But to challenge myself, I did an entire half-hour show using only a Flip camera. And man, the challenges. But it came out pretty good, and I was able to grab a couple of Emmys from it. And I'm like, okay, I could do this. So then when I left San Diego and Los Angeles and went to Dallas, Texas, my boss knew that I had done this and that I'd be up for a challenge. And one day, 6 years ago or so, she said, hey, Mike, can you go out and shoot a story using, only your phone because all of our crews are busy? And I said, I don't know, but, I cobbled some gear together and I knew audio would be a major thing. And if I could get that, sort of broadcast quality, I'd be okay. I could probably shoot, okay. So I did. I went out and shot a story that day and it aired and then I started doing them from there.
Which phone model was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was the 6. I had a 16 gig.
Oh, wow.
iPhone 6. Yeah.
That didn't hold a lot of video. And that was probably HD, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, when I went out to do this story, it was this renowned artist that was visiting, and I went there, and he knew that the big Channel 8 was coming out to interview him, and I went out there, and I started to talk to him, and after a few minutes, he was looking around, and he was like, is your camera person coming? Lights, audio, anything? And I said, no, today we're just going to do it with my phone. He was visibly underwhelmed.
Yeah.
But I said, just trust me and we'll see how it goes. And, it aired that night and he called right after it aired and he said, okay, I get it. So I knew that I would be able to do it.
No, that's great. I mean, I run into that with even small mirrorless or DSLR cameras on the filmmaking side.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously that's more where my work goes, more the narrative filmmaking, but I have an interest for sure in the mojo crowd, mobile journalism. And truth be told, I think at least with the current generation of phones, that really lends itself to, not only it could be broadcast journalism, but also citizen journalism. I mean, we've seen a lot of that during this pandemic and all the different protests and stuff going on. And so I think that has really, I like the word democratized is used a lot, and especially on the filmmaking side, but I think it has done that on the journalism side too with phones.
Yeah. I will constantly ask people when I go to speak at different events and tell me if I'm wrong, as I've seen through the years, filmmakers embrace this technology and television stations have been slow to adopt it. And even now, I have even stopped telling people that I shoot on a phone. And because I don't know, there's some stigma to it.
Sure.
Filmmakers have embraced it, and for good reason. They can make films now, but for some reason, television stations have been slow. I think that's changing, though.
Yeah. No, it is changing, but I do think they're slow. I mean, there's still stations in small markets that use Beta SP, so there's still tape people out there. I think they're few and far between, but anybody got some 3/4 inch laying around,
I could throw out some formats to you. I still have boxes of M2s.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've heard of that. I didn't work with that myself. I came in near the end of the Betacam, around the late 90s, early 2000s, Betacam and DigiBeta and all that was kind of still there, but going away with the new digital formats coming in.
Right.
Well, so again, keeping it in your mind from a broadcast perspective, have you found, and just by our short discussion here, I can tell you're not a super technical guy, which you're more of a storyteller, but have you found that the phone, in your opinion, has stood up to what you were used to working with in the past? The big broadcast cameras. In other words, have you seen any sort of difference that would say, this isn't really working for me?
No, can I see the difference? Only because, like I said, I've worked with the best photojournalists and, they're incredible artists and they know how to work the big cameras and, the depth of field and the close-ups. I mean, everything. So, but is it enough for me to say, gosh, I just can't do it with the phone? No, absolutely not. I'll never forget when early on, I took a piece into the station, and I went to the chief editor there, who's been in the business for 25 years, just a really respected guy. And I said, hey, can you take a look at this? And he looked at it. And I said, what'd you think? And he says, well, Mike, you always do great stories. I loved it. And I said, yeah, but what else? And he says, what do you mean, what else? And I said, do you see anything different? And he said, no. And he said, what are you getting at? And I said, well, I shot it on my phone. And he said, get the out of here. And so to the normal viewer, I think if you just, it's all about the story, and, so I've used it to my advantage.
Yeah, for sure. And in the news business, although this has changed a lot too, used to be, they didn't really care much about production value. You're just trying to get whatever the story is on the air. But the stuff that you did were more packaged kind of stories. You went out, and some of the stuff you've done reminds me, and including your show, Phoning It In, reminds me a little bit of Texas Country Reporter, the Bob Phillips kind of stuff. Yours is a little more
right.
Yours is a little more quirky.
Thanks, I think.
No, I mean, that's good. I always like that kind of stuff. The story, I mean, you just get kind of engrossed in going to meet a bootmaker in South Texas or whatever it is,
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I'd like to, I've been looking into doing that, to actually doing segments.
Oh, like syndication kind of stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, tell me about Phoning It In for those that don't know. What is it?
Phoning It In is a half-hour show. I've done 6 of them now. And basically, they're just compilations of all of the other iPhone stories that I've done. I'll weave them into hopefully a kind of a fun half hour. And I usually poke fun at using a phone, and I usually poke fun at the other people who don't think I should be using a phone. I always have a little commentary in these Phoning It In shows, but
so these air on broadcast TV.
Yeah, they air on the 5th largest market in the country. And the best part for me is, I just love competing on the same level as everybody else in the business, and competing and oftentimes winning in some of these awards that we're judged by. And so there's nothing more gratifying than that for me.
Yeah, that is very cool. And that's kind of the point, I think, to using these. I mean, I use the word DIY, but in a way it is DIY. The technology has really leveled the playing field to where I assume you're more or less a one-man band on your jobs and your shoots.
Yep, it's just me. In fact, with Phoning It In, if we're still talking about those half hours, it's just me. And one phone. Yeah, I remember when there was an episode of Modern Family that came out a few years ago, and I think they billed that episode as the first half hour episode, shot completely on iPads and iPhones. And, while I was doing it before that, they did it, but they also had, I think they used 45 devices and a crew of 150 people.
Right.
So, that's a little different than being my one phone.
That is. Now, I'd seen your show before, but I refreshed my memory and I watched part of the episode where you started off at the Kessler Theater in Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
And you had all the big crew out there, and you were poking fun. You had all the lights, and
yeah.
And so that was all staged, obviously. And so were those people from Channel 8, or was that kind of a planned out deal, or some of that improvised, or how'd you do that?
Yes, it was. I had, I graciously asked, and they graciously accepted, all of the production crew from Channel 8 to come out as if they were going to shoot a big production, and they knew that I wasn't going to use them at all.
Okay.
And so they set up all of their scrims and their lights, and their big trucks were out there, and dollies, and then when they finally got all set up, I pulled my phone out of my pocket and I said, guys, I really appreciate all of this, but not going to need you today. And then they started packing up. As soon as they set everything up, they started packing up. It was all a joke. It was
Sure.
It was fun. We had fun.
And that's kind of interesting in your show. And obviously the show is called Phoning It In. And then you mentioned earlier how you kind of poke fun of using a phone. It's kind of unusual to tell people what you're shooting with. In other words, if you go out and just do a normal story, you don't say, hey, I'm shooting on a Panasonic, blah, blah, blah. So What was the idea behind it? Was it because people maybe at first weren't taking you serious, in that so you're kind of making that part of the shtick? Or was it more kind of a marketing thing to get people to say, hey, this whole show was shot on iPhone?
Yeah, I think originally it was the novel concept of before the half-hour shows aired, I'd air just daily stories on the news, and the anchors would say something like, and now, Mike Castellucci has a story from North Texas that he shot only on his phone. At that time I was the only one doing it. So that was enough, I think, to proclaim that.
Yeah,
I
and pique
guess.
people's interest, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Or lower their expectations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. And then so with the half-hour shows, I was just like, hey, nobody could be. I mean, we even billed the first half-hour show as a broadcast first, because I don't think anybody had, shot an entire half-hour show using only their phone.
And not for broadcast TV. I don't think so.
Not for broadcast, exactly.
You'll see
Right.
some reporters on like World News or what have you, occasionally doing a stand-up or doing something with their phone, you can tell, or they're shooting it themselves.
Right.
But usually that's just one little piece to a larger story that was shot on, big cameras.
Exactly. Yeah. People go out, reporters go out, and a phone might be their third camera
Right.
on a shoot these days. But it's my whole production company.
Yeah, I interviewed Mark Settle from the BBC. He's there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, a good friend of mine.
yeah. And so I was under the impression, just based on interacting with him on Twitter, that there was quite a few people at the BBC using their phones as the main storytelling tool. But it turns out that while they have a whole academy dedicated to teaching people how to use their phone, and he runs it, that in reality, there isn't that much that they're doing at the BBC, except for what you just said, the occasional second or third camera.
Right.
But he has hopes, just like, all of us in this industry, that will change over time. But it's like you said earlier, that can be really slow. People are used to what they're used to.
Yeah, Mark at the BBC, and then there's another gentleman that works for RTE, the Ireland broadcasting company. That his name's Philip Bromwell. He's a guy who does all of his shooting on a phone, but it's still, I think, a small community. Will it ever become bigger? I don't know. I can't figure it out. But
I think in the news, it has a good chance to, especially for kind of like we were talking about when you're covering the pandemic and you're out by yourself, or you're doing war reporting, or what I mean, stuff where it's hard to have a crew with you. And the technology is getting really good to where the average person in particular cannot tell it apart for the most part. I don't think, at least.
Right. And, and for me, the reason I did it in the first place was just, as a creative outlet.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like maybe something to my advantage where I can go out and, like you said, a one-man band, I can do everything. There's no overhead with me.
Yeah. Now, do you consider yourself part of the Mojo crowd, as they like to call it, mobile journalism?
Yeah, I know. See, so the Mojo crowd that I feel was really kind of the group anyway. A group was started by Glenn Mulcahy.
Yeah, Glenn. I know Glenn.
Glenn over in
Ireland.
In Ireland, and he knew what I was doing, and he invited me over to Mojo Fest to speak, and I have been able to go over there and speak and conduct sessions at each of their Mojo Fests for the last, 6 years.
Okay, great.
And so I know the group really well, look forward to it every year. And every time that I would go over there and watch other people's sessions, and I'm like, I was thinking to myself, I'm not one of these people. I just I don't know. I just am doing it myself. I guess I am. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess so. Sure.
Well, I think part of it is, like you said at the beginning, you started as a reporter. You didn't even,
Right.
Unless you're in a really small market, most reporters never shoot or edit their stuff. I mean,
Right.
they're on camera, they do the writing and that kind of thing, or they work with the producers. And so it's probably just a little different mentality, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I didn't shoot at all of my first 15 years in the news business, 20 years, I guess. now almost everybody is an MMJ, a multimedia journalist, or a
Yeah.
MSJ, a multi-skilled journalist. They all go out on their own, but they have a lot more gear. It's just a little smaller than regular gear, I guess, but it's certainly not a phone, I don't think, in most cases.
Speaking of gear, on those jobs, I know you said it's really just you and your phone. Is that really all? I mean, you don't take a wireless mic. Do you have any lighting? Just give people an idea of a basic package of equipment package that you would take with you.
Yeah. Oh no, my rig has gone berserk. I have way too much. I started with it was just important to have, a tripod, something to keep it steady, and somehow to get broadcast quality audio out of it. And that's easily solved now with the wireless mic and the proper adapter into the phone. I've never used a light. You brought up a light. I think it was funny. I don't mean to mention awards, but I just won a national award, and I saw one of the judges' comments, and one of the comments was, the interview was brilliantly lit. It looked magical or something like that. I don't use a light. So I just put the subject like near a window, and it was just a nice shot.
That's great, though. Natural light can look amazing, and that you just got to know where to put them, like you say.
Right. I've used a flashlight in the car when it was dark, but other than that. And then tripod, wireless microphone, and I always use a couple of different lenses that I can attach. One's a wide angle and one's a telephoto.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you have a particular video camera app you use?
I use Filmic Pro for some shots, and I use Beastcam, which is similar.
Yeah.
But for the most part, those are the only two that I use.
But you use those
app-wise
exclusively, meaning you don't use the native camera app?
That's basically what I use. I use the native camera app, and occasionally for, when I want to get a lot of depth of field and different type of shots like that, I'll use Filmic Pro.
Yeah. The other apps, I guess the bigger advantage is because you have a lot more manual control, and then you have higher bit rates, which especially for broadcast, if you're doing something for broadcast, I would definitely personally go that route. And I just was curious now. So what do you...
And see, you said I wasn't a tech guy, and I'm not. I've never messed with that stuff. Maybe I should.
No, I didn't say you weren't a tech guy. That was just my reading of you.
Well, no, you're right.
Do you edit mobily, or do you edit on a computer?
Yeah, so I'll transfer all the clips to just, my photos on iCloud on my MacBook Pro, and then edit on Final Cut Pro.
Okay. But you do all your editing as well then?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you really are a one-man band. That's great.
Right. I mean, geez, hire me.
Well, what is your favorite part of working with the phone? You've probably answered that a little bit, but if you had to pick one or two primary things.
Let me take that question at the opposite end, which is people always ask, what are the disadvantages of it? And I always think nothing. The only thing that I can ever come up with as a disadvantage is, you don't have a zoom lens on it, so you can't really do a story on something far away, like the moon. I've never done a story on or about the moon, maybe because it's far away.
Okay.
although there's ways to do it, I'm sure. Or, a football game is a little hard because you're on the sidelines, so you can't really get close. But other than that, there's no disadvantage. I can't come up with a disadvantage. I think the advantage is I've never been one to carry, and lug 50 pounds of gear around. I never was a photographer, and the heaviest thing I carried on stories was my notebook, and I'm not a big guy, so the littler the better, and so that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly my position as well, and that is that the portability, the ease of use of phones are the biggest selling point, and then the disadvantages you didn't really go into too much, but what you said is true. The telephoto aspect is tricky. The new phone that was just released has a little bit of a better telephoto lens, and then you can buy third-party lenses to put on it. But some of the technical things are the biggest hang up for me as a filmmaker, and mainly it's shooting in low light, that kind of thing. The footage can get noisy, but if you're doing documentary or new stuff, that doesn't matter as much. And then again, the newer phone, I don't know if you watched the iPhone 12 announcement. and it's kind of tech nerdy stuff, but the sensor is bigger now. You can now shoot in 10-bit video. And so those are really exciting things that the average person probably doesn't care much about. But the end result you'll be able to get, especially shooting in low light, should be much better.
Oh, that's good. I missed the announcement, and I wondered if I need to turn in my 11 Pro already.
I'm going to, but then again, I run a channel called the iPhoneographers on YouTube, and so I kind of keep up to the camera is a pretty big update. It really is. I can't remember the exact stats right now, but I think it was like 47%, 50% better in low light.
Oh, that's great.
It for sure is a bigger sensor. And then the 10-bit video aspect is pretty big for what I do because I do a lot of color grading in post-production.
Okay.
And you can color grade the 8-bit video, which is what phones have shot forever. And of course, a lot of traditional cameras shoot that as well. But you can't overly color grade. You can't really push the grade without breaking the footage up and get it banding and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And so, again, that's kind of going into the tech weeds a little bit. But little things like that, even for what, news people do, is good because oftentimes you guys are going in to shoot an interview or wherever, and you just said you don't really use lights where you might be in minimal lighting or it might be dark or you might be lighting it by a flashlight. So that kind of stuff can make a difference.
Right. Wanted to mention one thing is I have a bayonet mount or screw mount a lens on, and I use it 95% of the time. It's a wide angle lens, and people will say, well, your phone has the new wide angle lens. And what I've found is that wide angle lens is just too wide, a little too wide. You could use it for a shot or two, but after that it would be too much, I feel. And then the regular camera view is not wide enough. So I have a wide angle lens I guess it's right in between those two.
Yeah,
and that's what I use most of the time.
Probably an 18 millimeter.
18, yep.
Is it a moment lens?
No, it's a Beast grip.
Okay, yeah, they make good stuff too.
Yep.
Yeah, the ultra wide is 13 millimeter. I have this question all the time: should I still use third party, external mount lenses? And I say for some things, yes.
Yep.
And not only to what your point is correct, the 13 millimeter ultra wide can almost look stylized sometimes, almost like a GoPro.
Yep.
But it's also the slowest aperture. And so, like, I was shooting some stuff recently just on the inside of a construction project I've been working on, sunlight coming in, but because that lens is just not very good in low light, it's just super noisy. And I was really surprised when I looked at the footage later. But if you use the main wide lens, like you're talking about, it is a faster aperture, so it's much better in low light. You put that, you adapt that lens on there, then your footage just looks so much better. So
yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. Even though you have all these different choices, depending on what you're doing, you may not want to be as wide, or you may want to have faster aperture, or you may want to use a telephoto. B-Script has that 3 times telephoto that I haven't used it, that a lot of people just love.
That's
really
I use it all the time. Yes, all the time.
Oh, great.
Yep. And I love it.
That is really cool because, as you said, that's the telephoto. What I've done is put the telephoto on the telephoto outside. So then you're getting like a 4 or 6 times, depending on what adapter you're using. So that can be kind of cool.
Yes, I use it. I use that 3X all the time. In fact, now my go-to for interviews where I'll shoot somebody wide, and then I want to get just their face, and it's a great lens, and it produces some pretty good depth of field.
Yeah,
as well.
Some shallow depth of field, some bokeh.
Yeah. Yep, that's right.
So it sounds like, though, even though you didn't come from a tech background and you're not a technical person per se, just along the way being a one-man crew out of necessity, but also it sounds like you enjoy it. You've kind of become a little bit of a tech guy.
Yeah, that's right. I love some of the new gadgets that come out. I use Moment and they're great. And the new, I still haven't gotten it yet, but I need to get it. The new Peak Design travel tripod, I think, is something that I need. And
yeah, those look really nice. I have a travel tripod from Manfrotto that I like, but it's a little bit heavy. And so if you really are traveling, it's probably not the best.
Right.
It's a super solid tripod, but some of those lighter tripods, I think they make one that's carbon fiber. That kind of stuff is really good if you're actually traveling.
Yep. Just as long as I don't get too big with it.
Yeah, no, I understand. And that's kind of that's a debate I have routinely. Again, talking about the filmmaking side, sometimes we'll trick out the phone and it starts getting big. You put, like you mentioned, B-Script, you put use a beast cage and you put their depth of field adapter on it. Then you put all these photo lenses.
Yep.
It is fun. It is cool, but it starts diminishing the portable side of a phone. That's one argument.
Yeah, I just for fun, I have that DOF adapter from Beast Grip, and which means you can put any DSLR lens on that and your phone.
Sure.
And so I bought and then returned, just to let you know. It was like a $1,400 art lens. It was a zoom lens, and I just wanted to see, and it was great, but that lens was heavier than my entire kit.
Yeah.
And so I just thought, if I keep this on there, I mean, it's cool and everything, just like you said, but it's just as big as, gosh,
those
like
Sigma.
a camera.
You're talking about a Sigma art lens, I'm sure.
Yes.
And I've got a couple myself, and I love those lenses, but they are bulky. Especially when you put it on a small camera, like a mirrorless camera. I have a Blackmagic camera, and when I put it on that, it fits a little bit better. It's a little more of a cinema setup. But when you put that on a smaller camera, it's like you say, it's tilting forward. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, so phoning it in, you mentioned earlier that you want to make another one. Is that something that's in the works? Are you planning to do that? Is that something you would be paid for, or would you pay for it yourself and then you would try to syndicate it? How would that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, luckily I have still some, good relationships down there in Dallas, and I'm sure that if I did it, that I could get it aired, and then they would pay me for it. That's how it's been. It's a little different being not working for them full time, because usually it's salary in that case, and I go out and do stuff. In this case, I go do things, and then we have to come up with how to get paid. I guess a lot of people work that way.
Yeah, but when those air, is that almost like, and I'm not saying this as a derogatory. Is it almost like when a company buys an infomercial, so you buy that 30-minute segment and then they sell ads against that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's why I want to do it. Since I haven't been full-time employed down there at a TV station for a few years now, I'm seeing that the content, and that's what people like about my work, is the content. And especially now when people need to see something good and positive, and Texas, everybody enjoys the shared story down there, and I just think it's a good time to end a newscast with a positive, enlightening, inspiring story, and that's what I like to do. So I'd like to do that, and I've heard that. And maybe I should contact the Texas Country Reporter about how he does it for the last 30 years. But,
yeah.
But the word is that advertisers would love to be associated with content like mine. So it would be great to sell something like that in a sponsored segment and just do it on my own. That would be a goal of mine, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so is that, I know you're teaching right now, but I guess, is that part of your future plans, or are you planning to continue? Now, when you're up in Michigan, are you doing some of these stories now too, or do you only do them when you come down? I mean, you mentioned you come down during the summer and knock out a bunch of them,
right?
Or are you doing that continuously?
Yeah, I like to do it whenever I can. In fact, I just got finished with I think I mentioned it earlier, a story on this poet in Detroit, and that'll air on NBC-LX.
Oh, right, yeah, that's the freelance gig you were talking about. Okay.
So it's nice to just keep shooting. I just I'd rather probably do the shows full time and maybe teach part time.
Yeah, and so I guess you're teaching now. All this sort of is a way to put all these things together to make a living. Is that kind of what you're doing? I mean, in a way, it's kind of like what we do on the filmmaking side. I make movies, but I don't necessarily make them all the time. Mm-hmm. And being in Texas as an indie filmmaker, there's not a ton of work, especially right now, there's very little work. And so we do corporate video, and we do commercials, and we do YouTube, and we do a wide variety of things to make a living, more or less.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, just a quick story. I think it's kind of funny. Again, it's an award thing, but yeah, I've been teaching up here, but I wanted to do a story, and I did a story, and I submitted it to the Michigan chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, the Emmy thing, and I was nominated, and we went to the awards ceremony. And I had to, when I submitted it, it says submitting station, because most of these submissions are from TV stations.
Okay.
Well, mine wasn't, because I was just, teaching up here. So I learned that I could put down YouTube for submitting station. And to me, that was funny. I don't know why. I guess working at TV stations all my life, and then not having one, and still, competing.
Sure.
And so we got to the gala, and the category came up, and I won, and I got to the stage, and I said, I'd like to thank all of my coworkers at YouTube. And crickets. I mean, they didn't think that was funny at all. I thought it was hilarious, and then I quietly left the stage.
They may feel threatened, you know what I mean? The dinosaur media, as it's sometimes called.
Right.
Well, good. Well, I hope you can continue it, because I do like it, and I think you bring all that experience from broadcast to, you're joking about YouTube, but in reality, YouTube is a good way to, you could even do YouTube, to be honest.
Yes.
It's harder to probably do something on a consistent basis, but not necessarily. I mean, you just have to build up enough subscribers or views to make money on the ad revenue.
Right. Still haven't figured that out.
Yeah. I mean, my point is, it's a little bit tougher with local human interest stories versus more national or
right.
That kind of news. You know what I mean?
Yes, but that'd be great. That'd be great to do. Yeah. And I follow you all the time. I love iPhonographers.
Oh, well, thanks.
It's great.
I try to
really great.
Try to cover the gamut of mobile video and mobile filmmaking. Well, tell people where they can find out more about you, and then hopefully see future episodes of your show.
Yeah, so just YouTube is my name, Mike Castellucci. So if you do that, that's great. And Castellucci's hard to spell, but I'll just do it real quick. Castellucci.
I'll put the information in the show notes of the episode too. And then you have a Twitter page. And then what about your website? Do people go there, or are you mainly sending people to YouTube?
Yep. Twitter, YouTube, and my website's all just my name.
Okay.
They're all the same. Instagram also
Keeps it
is
easy.
the same. Yeah.
Well, hey, I really think it's cool what you've been doing, and it's fun talking to you. I have, I followed you for quite a while. I remember the very first time I saw you on Channel 8, and I just remember thinking, who is this crazy guy? Because your stuff was all so, over the top, but in a fun way, and it was just not your normal dry news. And you weren't doing the puppy and ice cream stories necessarily. You were doing more fun stuff. And so that's cool that you've taken that and doing it with your phone and that kind of stuff. So
I'll always have wanted to do something different, and that's what's driven me all of these years. So whatever's different, and the phone is different, then that was it.
Yeah, man. Well, it works. It really does. And I think, as you said, there's not many people doing it, and that can be good or bad, but I think it's good. Right. There may be a reason that a lot of the people are doing it, but no, I think it's good. And I will, again, I'll put links in the show notes, and I'll post this on Twitter as well.
Great.
Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
I will talk to you soon. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mike. As I mentioned during the podcast, I was aware of him as a reporter because of his quirky storytelling style, which is great. I really do highly suggest you go check out some of his stories. He really does things in a different way, and not just when it comes to iPhone, just the shot selection, the editing, the pacing, just the storytelling style, and he really does tell good stories. But it was so interesting that I knew of him as a traditional reporter, and just by coincidence, I saw on Twitter several years ago that he was doing iPhone stuff now. And so we connected on Twitter. Again, that's how I've connected with pretty much half the people I know in this industry and that I've had on my podcast. And I really love talking to other people who are using these mobile video tools in unique ways and really pushing them to be used in ways they were never meant to be used and getting really good results. I personally find it inspiring, and so I hope you do too. Regarding the iPhone 12 and some upcoming videos and podcasts, I am pre-ordering the 12 Pro Max. I've heard some debate on Twitter about which phone to get. If you're getting it for video, in all caps, if you're getting it for the video capabilities, you really should go with the Pro Max. It's got the larger sensor, and it has the more or less IBIS. It has the sensor shift stabilization. That is huge on the wide lens. The ultra-wide on the iPhone 11 Pro really helped a lot. I mean, a lot for us video folks that want to move the camera and not on a gimbal. But even on a gimbal, that OIS can be terrible. It's so bad. The biggest question I have though, it's so great that we have the 10-bit video and this new stabilization and the new telephoto lens on the Pro Max. But will the dynamic tone mapping, will that be less aggressive, more aggressive? God, I hope it's not more aggressive. That is my biggest issue with the phone right now. I can't use the phone in many situations that I want to use it, especially more cinematic situations where I'm shooting in lower light and I'm moving the camera in high contrast scenes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I have examples on my YouTube channel. I just did a video recently about the vertical cinema short film that Damien Chazelle produced. And there's an example of it in that. It's basically looks like an exposure shift with your camera. Oh, drives me crazy. Fingers crossed though that has been eliminated or mightily toned down. I should get that phone in about a month. Right now it's mid-October and I can pre-order that November 6th and I should get it about a week or so later. And so videos will follow soon thereafter and some podcasts. I don't want to talk too much or speculate about the phone until I get my hands on it. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube with people just blab into the camera, pure speculation. That's great. They're trying to get views on YouTube. I understand. But I really want to get my hands on it first before I really go out and make any proclamations or make any determinations. I don't like to review movies I haven't seen. So last thing, guys, is please remember that I have several online mobile filmmaking courses. That's one way you can support what I do here on this podcast and my YouTube channel. They're on my website at iphonographers.tv. This has been another episode of Almost Professional. I'm Blake Calhoun, your host. Thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode.